Hi, in this Affinity Designer tutorial, we're going to make a DIY notebook, and we're going to design it in Designer, and then we'll print it out and assemble it into a tear-off notepad. So recently I had to start physical therapy, and I realized that on day one, I forgot to do my exercises already. So this I'm making as a physical therapy tracker, but you can make any kind of notepad that you want out of this, but you'll get to see a lot of different techniques as we go through this tutorial. So hopefully it will be valuable to applying it to whatever kind of notepad you might want to make, even if it's just a simple list. So let's get started. I'm going to leave this here as a reference, and then we'll start a new file. So File, New. Now, since I'm printing this myself, I'm just going to use the size of paper that my printer has, and then I can divide it into four pieces of paper by cutting it with a cutter. So I'm going to leave it letter size, but I do want to have it in portrait mode because I have 4 exercises and 7 days of the week, so I'm going to want to make it a portrait style notepad. So I don't really need to change anything else, but I do want to have some margins. And so I'm setting these at 0.3. So just make sure that this is linked together, and you can type 0.3 in and it'll change them in all of the boxes. I also have include margins ticked here. So we'll create our document, and the next thing I want is some guides. So if you go out to the rulers on the side, and if you don't see those, you'll want to make sure that View and Show Rulers is on. And I'm just going to click in there and grab, and just pull it out to the middle of my page. Now I do have snapping on up here so that it will snap when it reaches the middle. Now I'm going to go to the top ruler and pull a ruler down until I see that line come up. That tells me I'm at the center. So now I've got these 4. What I would also like is to have margins around each of these, because each of these 4 squares is going to be a page in my little notepad. So let's set up some more guides. So I'm going to pull a few more out and just kind of eyeball them for starters. Okay, and now I want to adjust them. We made these margins on the outside 0.3 inches. So I'm going to adjust these margins to also be 0.3 from my middle guides. So to do that, I'm going to go to View, Guides, click on that, and that brings up this little window. And so my horizontal guides are the ones that are horizontal lines. My middle one is 5.5 inches. So I'm going to double click on this one. You see it highlights in pink, and it's currently at the 5.14 position. And I want to do 5.5, which is my middle position, and minus 0.3, and that puts it at 5.2. I'm going to double click on this one and do 5.5, which is my middle line, plus 0.3. And that's at 5.8. So now these ones are perfectly spaced 0.3 inches from that middle line. So let's do the same thing to the vertical one. So the vertical one, the center one is 4.25. So we'll double click on this one and go 4.25 minus 0.3. And this one will be 4.25 plus 0.3. And then we can close this up. And now I have all of my margin guides set up. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to draw out a rectangle that covers the entire space of one of my notepad sheets. Then I'm going to go to Window and open the symbols. And with this rectangle selected, I'm going to just click Create. And that's all I need to do for now, is just create that. I don't care that it's gray. We are not going to see this in the end, but it will come in handy. And we'll see that in a little bit. So let's start designing the notepad. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw some lines. So I'm going to grab the pen tool click on line mode. We need to give it a stroke, so I don't like to have too heavy of a stroke, so I'm going to do 0.8, and I'm going to leave it as a line. And then I can click on a spot. Let's just click along this margin guide, hold shift, and we'll bring it out to about here. So there's my first line. I'm going to go to the Move tool and leave this selected. Do Command or Control J, depending if you're on a Mac or a Windows. That created a duplicate here. This duplicate is now selected, and I have my transform window here. I'll pull it out so you can see it. If you don't see that, you can go to Window and Transform. And this line is currently at the 1.15 inches. So I'm going to click on it. I don't want it to be pink. I want to click it a second time so that my cursor is behind the inches. Plus, and let's just pick something like 0.3. That's like a wide ruled. Now that has moved my duplicated line down by 0.3 inches. Without unselecting it, I'm going to hit Command J again and just keep hitting J with Command held down. And I think I might have done one too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so that last one I don't need. So we'll just delete that one. Okay, so let's just move this back over here. Now we have our 7 lines for the 7 days of the week. Now, these obviously turned out a little too close together for the size of this page. So let's select over all of them. And actually, sorry, I don't want to do that. I want to hold shift and move my bottom one down to near the bottom of the page. Let's put it around, here. And actually, let's maybe move my top one down a bit too. And so now I'm going to grab all of these so that they are all selected. Go up to the Alignment tool, and I want to go to Align Vertically, Space Vertically. And that distributed them evenly between my top line and my bottom line. So there are my lines. The next thing I want is I'm going to do these little barbells. So like I said, I'm making this for physical therapy. So let's go to the Shape tools and to the Arrow tool. I'll just draw this out over here so we can see it really well. So there we have our arrows. But if you go up to the toolbar here, you'll see there's the ends. And we can switch this end to a circle, and we can switch this end to a circle. And so now it looks a little bit more like a barbell. Now I can change this if I want, but I'm thinking if you're looking at a barbell sideways, this is kind of what it's going to look like. All right, so I'm also going to just take the stroke off of this and change the fill color just so it's obvious, because we've got this gray background here. So we'll move this over here. It's too big, so we'll just kind of squish it up. Something like that. Could maybe even be just a little smaller. So now let's copy and paste that. So Command or Control C and Command or Control V to copy and paste. And then my pasted one is selected, and we'll just move it over here. Now I'm going to make this a little smaller still. And my goal is to actually have these 4 circles be relatively evenly spaced. So actually, let's get rid of this one. I'm going to copy and paste this one so that they are the same size. And it's pretty close. It's a little bit closer here than I'd like, but I'm happy with that. We'll move on with the video. I won't pain you with watching me be perfectionist. So now let's grab the text tool. This is the artistic text tool. You could use either, but I think the artistic text tool will be a little bit easier in this case because it makes its text frame the same size as your font. So we'll just put that one over here. and it is behind my barbell, so I'm just going to go move to front. I'm going to copy and paste that, hold shift and then drag it into my next space, paste another copy, hold shift and drag that, and paste one more copy, and I'm doing Command or Control V there to just continue pasting another copy. And now I've got them all in their spots, and now these are going to be my 4 exercises that I'm tracking. And of course, this is the part that will be variable to your situation. If you are making this for physical therapy, then you would do it for the number of exercises you have, or whatever it is you're tracking. But for this example, we're just doing 4. All right, so now I've got my 4 numbers in there. I've kind of tweaked them a little bit to look a little bit more centered. And now we can zoom out a little. And the next thing I'm going to do is my days of the week here. So I'm going to also use the artistic text tool, and I'll just start with an S, and I'm going to just change the font of this, and I think I did impact. Impact makes a nice bold letter. All right, and back to the move tool so that we can copy and paste this. And since we need 7 of these, actually duplicate might not hurt. So let's Command J to duplicate. Hold Shift while we just move this down a little bit. And Command J, 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 J. So I think that's 7. So now we can go back to the text tool and change these to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I'm going to grab all of these and then move them onto my artboard. And let's move this down so that it is fairly close to being even with this line. I'm going to just use my arrow keys to nudge it up a little bit. And then we'll take this one and line it up to be even with this line. And since we did, I think this needs to go a little lower. Since we did the auto distribute with these lines, we can do the same thing with these text boxes now. So let's go back up to alignment, distribute them vertically. And while we're at it, let's just align to the center. And so that'll just center them all to each other. All right, so there are my letters. And I think one thing I want to do is just move all of this down a little bit. So I'm going to grab all of it and just slide it down a little bit so there's a little more distance from my barbells. Okay, and also I think let's get picky, but let's just center it a little bit more between our margin guides, which means we'll also want to grab all of this as a group and just slide that over a bit too. So the next thing I want to do is I've got these fainter dotted lines kind of in between to just divide this up into some squares. So let's create that. Back to the pen tool. We're still in line mode, but this time I want to choose the dotted line. And I find that if you go down here and put 2 and 2 in the boxes, that's a pretty good distance for dots. So, oops. Okay, so I'm going to go to this bottom line, and it's telling me I'm centered in the barbell, which is because I have snapping on. And I'm going to go up to roughly here, and there is my dotted line. So now I'm going to go to the Move tool, leave it selected, Command J. We'll move that about there. Command J again, and that looks like it ended up pretty centered. Maybe move it over just a hair. Okay, so there are my 4 lines, and I'm just going to turn this gray rectangle off for just a second so that we can zoom in And I do want to make these lines just a little lighter than my lines that are going up and down, just because I want them a little fainter. So I want the swatches and the grays, and we'll just pick something like this. I don't want to go too light because I find that on a printer that doesn't show up. And then the last thing I want to do is, if you get really close in here, you'll see that my gray line is overlapping my black line. I don't want that. So let's take these 3 gray lines. I'm going to select them in the layer with holding Shift, Command G to group them. And then I'm going to take this group and send it to the back. And so now it's behind that black line. Get rid of that. Don't need that anymore. All right, so we have now got our basic layout done. And what I want to do now, take this symbol here and I want to move it to the top. And then I want to take everything that is left, hold Shift and group all of it. So click the top one, click the bottom one while holding Shift. And I'm going to Control G to group that. And I'm going to then carry that up into the symbol until that symbol layer turns blue and let go. So now what I can do is I can take this and I can duplicate it. And now my duplicated layer is selected. And then we can grab both of these, Control V to copy and paste, Control C and Control V to copy and paste. And now we have all these. Now the thing that will happen now is every change that we make to this one will be reflected in all of these. So a lot of times, we just design one, copy and paste it, and then it's like, oops, I wanted to change something, and then you have to change it in all 4. So if you set it up like this with the symbol, now any sort of tweaks we make from this point on will be reflected in all 4 layouts. So let's take a look at that. So the last thing I want to do is I want to decorate this a little bit. So I'm going to turn off this gray symbol rectangle. This is the rectangle that we created and made into a symbol, but I want to turn that gray off. So in the layers, I'm finding that rectangle and clicking the little dot next to it to turn it off. And you'll already see it turned it off in all 4 squares. So to decorate this, I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can do this. So I am in Designer. I am going to go to the pixel persona up here, and I'm going to open my brushes. So if you don't see that, make sure that brushes has a little check mark next to it. I'm going to grab the paintbrush tool, and I'm in the sprays and spatters, which I think it is default, or it's something that you can download when you buy Affinity. It comes with a few little brushes. It's nothing special that I purchased. So spray, and I'm going to do this little airbrush here, and I'm going to go down to my colors here and make sure that a color that I want is in front here, which would be the pink that we're using here. So, and then I'm just going to paint in my margin area. I'm just using a mouse so you can see that it's going over the edge. And so then you can just kind of decide how you want to paint that. And that just kind of creates a subtle little border here around our Notepad pages that won't take up a whole lot of ink when we print it. Now you can see I went over the edges with that, so let's fix that. We can go back to designer mode. We're done with the paintbrush now. And I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I want it to be the same size as my margins. So we'll do that. And then I'm going to draw a second one that's the same as the inside of my margins. And just to make it obvious, we're going to just change that to a different color. Sorry, we don't want a stroke. We want to change the fill to black. All right, so my black one, my smaller one, is on top of my bigger one. So with this selected, I'm just going to hold Shift and select both rectangles. and then come up to these geometry tools here and click subtract. And so that kind of made a frame. So now what I can do is I can take this pixel layer and drag it up until that turns blue. And oops, I gotta do one more thing. I need to take the color off of my frame. So let's get rid of the stroke, get rid of the fill, and now let's drag the pixel up into there. And you can see that that trimmed off and kind of masked out all of the parts that were bleeding over into the other ones. So now the last thing I need to do is get this under my symbols, and that puts it on all 4 of them now. All right, so I'm going to just undo that and show you a second thing that you can do. Okay, so now we're back to the part where we created the frame by subtracting one rectangle out of the back rectangle with the geometry tools. And I'm going to turn off this pixel layer that we painted and show you something else that you can do. So I'm going to select this frame here. And let's just go to the gradient tool. And if you are not seeing this, click on this little arrow because it is shared with the transparency tool. So I'm going to click on that. Under context, we are going to fill this frame. And I'm going to go to bitmap. And then I want to scroll to find, I think it was here, my William Morris image here, and that fills that. And so you can grab these little handles and kind of manipulate it a little bit. I'm going to do something like that. All right, so the last thing I want to do is let's drag this into our original symbol layer. That puts it on all 4. And now in this group here on my bottom symbol, which is my original, let's just change the colors up to match. So I'm going to expand this out in the layers so that I can find my 2 barbells. Click the first one, hold shift and click the second one. Go over here to this dropper tool. Again, this is a shared tool, so you may need to click the little arrow to make sure that you've got the color picker tool. And then let's make this kind of similar to one of the greens. I think let's pick a lighter green here. And I'm just going to zoom in so that we can get a good match here. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick all of my letters. Same thing, pick the first one, hold shift, pick the top one. Still with the color picker tool on. Let's make this more like this color here. You could also pick out a color for the numbers. Let's just go ahead and do that. I think there's kind of a darkish green in here. Doesn't make a huge difference. Actually, you know what? I think in my original I had decided I liked the orange color better for the letters, so let's do that. Okay. Maybe we could see what happens if we make the numbers that magenta. So color picker tool, let's find a dark version of that. Maybe right here. Let's see what, oops. If I clicked away, I clicked on something white. So once you found your color, make sure you go back to the move tool. Not sure I like that better. And I'm actually just going to make it white. I think that'll look kind of cool. It looks like it's now punched out of the barbells. All right, there we go. We have got everything designed, and as you can see, once we use the symbol to duplicate this onto all 4 parts of this, we were able to continue to make changes and they were reflected everywhere. So the next thing to do will be to print this out and glue it into a notepad. So I'm going to create a separate video that shows how to do that because I'm going to show how to make a notepad in a couple different softwares. And so we're going to keep that part of actually physically making the notebook separate. So watch for that in the next video. So I saved my file. Let's go ahead and export it into something we can print. You can print directly from here, but I tend to just make an export. So I'm going to go here and choose a PDF for print, and I'm going to leave all my other settings the same and just export it. All right, there we go. I will see you in the next video where we will print and assemble.